quiet courtroom hums with tension. The air is thick, almost suffocating. A woman sits at the defendant's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes dart across the room, searching for familiarity in the sea of strangers. Across from her, a man sits with a hardened expression, his jaw clenched so tightly it looks as if it might shatter. The judge enters, and the courtroom falls silent. This isn't just another day in court. This is a day where secrets will be laid bare, where betrayal will be dissected, and where love, once thought unbreakable, has now become the foundation of a devastating legal battle. The tension isn't just between two people. It stretches to the families who sit in the rows behind them, their expressions frozen between pain and disbelief. It reaches the legal teams, their faces unreadable, yet their postures stiff with anticipation. The press, seated at the back, already know this case is going to be one of the most sensational trials in recent history. But what they don't know yet are the secrets about to be unearthed. Secrets that will leave everyone questioning how well they truly know the ones they love. A lawyer stands, clearing his throat. He turns toward the jury, his voice measured but deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just a case of infidelity. This is a case of deception, manipulation, and betrayal so deep that it shattered the very foundation of family. The words cut through the silence like a knife. The jury members exchange glances, already pulled into the gravity of the case. The judge nods, signaling for the opening arguments to begin. The husband, once a devoted partner, had no idea his life would change overnight. It started with small things, missed calls, late-night meetings, a distance in his wife's gaze. At first, he told himself it was stress. Everyone goes through rough patches, right? But the doubts kept creeping in. Then, the proof arrived, a message that wasn't meant for him. A name he had never heard before, a hotel receipt hidden in the depths of a purse. His world, which he had once considered stable, collapsed in an instant. As the prosecution lays out their case, the courtroom listens with bated breath. They describe the years of marriage, the promises made, the life built together. They speak of a woman who, in the eyes of society, was a devoted wife, a caring mother. But beneath that perfect image was another story. One of secret rendezvous, whispered phone calls, and a double life carefully maintained. The defense, however, has a different version. They paint the picture of a woman trapped, a woman who had spent years feeling invisible, unheard. They argue that her affair wasn't about betrayal, but about survival. She wasn't searching for excitement, the defense attorney says, locking eyes with the jury. She was searching for herself. The words linger, causing a ripple of murmurs through the audience. Even the husband shifts in his seat, as if hearing this for the first time. But the prosecution is prepared. They unveil the hidden bank accounts, the text messages that tell a story far different from what the defense is trying to sell. They call witnesses, friends who suspected but never said anything, colleagues who noticed the changes, a private investigator who followed the trail of deception. Piece by piece, the puzzle is laid out before the court, and with every revelation, the tension in the room thickens. And then, the moment that changes everything. A witness is called. Someone unexpected. Someone who shouldn't even be involved. The door opens, and as they walk in, gasps ripple through the room. Even the woman at the defense table turns pale. The truth isn't just coming out. It's about to explode. The moment the witness steps forward, the entire courtroom shifts. Whispers spread like wildfire, but a single glance from the judge silences them. The woman at the defense table stiffens. Her breath catches in her throat as she watches the man walk toward the witness stand. She knows him. She knows him too well. The prosecution's attorney wastes no time. State your name for the record. The man clears his throat, his voice steady but laced with something deeper, hesitation, perhaps even guilt. Michael Reeves. The name alone sends a wave of shock through the courtroom. The husband, sitting just a few feet away, exhales sharply. He knows that name. He's seen it before, hidden in messages, whispered in late-night calls. It was a name that confirmed what he'd been afraid to admit all along. The attorney leans forward, pressing into the silence. Mr. Reeves, can you tell us how you know the defendant? Michael hesitates. His eyes flicker toward the woman at the defense table. A silent conversation passes between them. filled with everything they cannot say aloud. Then he looks back at the jury. "We were involved," he says simply. The words hang in the air like a heavy cloud. The husband's fists clench at his sides. The jury shifts uncomfortably in their seats. Even the reporters in the back scramble to write it down. The affair is no longer speculation. It is fact. The prosecution paces slowly, deliberately. How long did this involvement last? Michael glances down, swallowing hard. About 3 years. A sharp gasp cuts through the room. The husband's knuckles turn white as he grips the edge of the table. 3 years. Not months. Not a mistake. A full-fledged relationship built on secrecy and deception. The prosecution isn't done. And during these 3 years, was the defendant's husband aware of your relationship? Michael shakes his head. No. She told me she was unhappy, that she was trapped in a marriage that had lost all meaning. She said she needed to feel alive again. The woman at the defense table closes her eyes, as if willing herself to disappear. The husband lets out a bitter laugh, but there is no humor in it, only pain. The prosecutor lets the weight of Michael's words settle before moving in for the next blow. "Mr. Reeves, did you ever discuss leaving your own wife a defendant?" Michael shifts in his seat. "We talked about it," he admits, his voice quieter now. "But she said it was too risky, that she had too much to lose." The words hit like a slap. The betrayal wasn't just about an affair. It was about choices. She had chosen to keep her husband as her safety net, while living another life in the shadows. But the biggest shock is yet to come. The prosecutor picks up a stack of documents from the table and holds one up. "Mr. Reeves, are you aware that the defendant was not only maintaining this affair with you, but also with another man at the same time?" The room erupts in murmurs. Even Michael looks blindsided. "What?" He breathes, his face paling. The prosecutor turns to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence a series of emails and text messages exchanged between the defendant and a second man, one who is not Mr. Reeves." The defense attorney jumps up. "Objection! This is speculation." The judge raises a hand. "Overruled. Continue." The prosecutor steps toward Michael, placing the documents in front of him. These messages indicate that the defendant was involved with yet another individual while still carrying on an affair with you. Would you like to read them? Michael hesitates, then picks up the papers. His eyes scan the text and his expression darkens. His grip on the pages tightens. When he finally looks up, the betrayal in his eyes is unmistakable. "I had no idea," he says, barely above a whisper. The woman at the defense table finally speaks, her voice strained. "Michael, please." But he won't look at her. He won't even acknowledge her presence. The prosecution turns back to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is not a simple extramarital affair. This is a web of deception, carefully spun over years. The defendant not only betrayed her husband, but also the man she claimed to love. And now, the truth is finally coming out." The jury members sit motionless, absorbing every word. The husband shakes his head, his entire world crumbling around him. And the woman at the center of it all? She sits frozen, caught in the unraveling of her own lies. But the trial isn't over yet. The biggest revelations are still to come. The silence in the courtroom is deafening. The weight of betrayal hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. Michael Reeves, the man who thought he was the only one, now sits rigid in the witness chair, his fingers gripping the arms, as if holding on to the last shred of control he has left. His face is pale, his expression unreadable, but the fire in his eyes says everything. He's been played, lied to, used, and the realization is hitting him like a freight train. The woman at the defense table doesn't dare look at him. She knows. She's always known. The truth was never supposed to come out like this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, no matter how deeply they're buried. The prosecutor clears his throat, breaking the silence. His voice is calm, deliberate, as if he's in complete control of the chaos unfolding before him. "Mr. Reeves, you said you believed you were the only one in a relationship with the defendant. Is that correct?" Michael nods stiffly. "Yes." The prosecutor steps forward, lifting another set of documents. And yet, these records show that during the same period, the defendant was also in communication with another man. Phone records, emails, hotel bookings, payments made from an account her husband wasn't even aware of. Would you like to take a look? Michael doesn't reach for the papers. He doesn't need to. The damage is already done. The betrayal is already burning through him, twisting his stomach into knots. Instead, he exhales sharply and leans back, rubbing his hands over his face. "I don't need to see it," he mutters. The prosecutor turns toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is not just an affair. This is a woman who manipulated not one, but multiple men for years. She maintained separate lives, carefully weaving lies to keep each man believing he was the only one. And now, those lies are unraveling." The defense attorney rises quickly. Objection. Speculation. The judge barely glances up. Overruled. Continue. The husband, who has remained eerily silent throughout the testimony, finally moves. He leans forward, resting his elbows on the table, his fingers clasped together tightly. His eyes, dark and unreadable, are locked onto his wife. His voice, when he finally speaks, is quiet but carries a sharp edge. "Why?" It's a single word, but it carries more weight than an entire speech. She flinches. She doesn't answer. What could she possibly say? That she was bored? That she craved excitement? That she never truly thought she'd get caught? The prosecutor isn't done. He turns back to the jury. But this isn't just about infidelity. There's something more at play here. He walks toward the table, picking up another stack of papers. Financial records. Transactions that don't quite add up. Withdrawals made from joint accounts. Investments in places her husband never knew about. He lifts his gaze. "Mr. Reeves, did the defendant ever ask you for money?" Michael frowns, caught off guard. "Money? Yes." "Did she ever say she needed financial help? Maybe claim she was trapped in an unhappy marriage, but couldn't leave because of financial dependence?" Michael shifts uncomfortably. "I mean, she mentioned struggling, yeah. She said she had no financial freedom, that everything was controlled. She asked for help a couple of times." "And did you give her money?" Michael hesitates, then nods. "Yes." "How much?" Michael exhales. "Over time? Probably 60,000. Another murmur ripples through the courtroom. The husband's face darkens. He hadn't known about this. That his wife had not only betrayed him emotionally, but also financially. The prosecutor lifts another document. And yet, these records show that during the same period, the defendant was not financially struggling at all. In fact, she had more than enough funds. She owned multiple secret accounts, transferred money regularly, and even made investments using the money given to her by Mr. Reeves and possibly others. He looks at Michael. "Do you see what's happening here?" Michael doesn't respond, but the look in his eyes says everything. He wasn't just a lover. He was a target, a pawn. The husband suddenly stands. The entire courtroom tenses. His voice is strained, but sharp as he speaks. "How long have you been doing this?" The woman at the defense table looks up, her eyes glassy, her hands trembling slightly. She doesn't answer, because the truth is, it didn't start with Michael. It didn't even start with the other man. This was a pattern, a game she had been playing for years. And now, the game was over. The courtroom is silent, but the tension is unbearable. The weight of betrayal, lies, and manipulation presses down on everyone in the room. The husband stands there, his knuckles white, his breath heavy, his entire world shattered before him. His wife, the woman he once trusted with his life, sits frozen at the defense table, her lips slightly parted as if she wants to speak, but doesn't know what to say. What could she say? That it was all a mistake? That she never meant for it to get this far? That she never meant to hurt anyone? The words would be meaningless now. The damage was already done. The prosecutor moves closer to the jury, his voice steady but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have witnessed today is not just about an affair. It's about deception. It's about a woman who played two men against each other, who took advantage of their love, their trust, and their finances. But it goes even deeper than that. He turns back to the defendant, watching her carefully, gauging her reaction. We have more evidence, more lies, more secrets that were never meant to be uncovered. He lifts a folder from the table. Its contents thick with documents and records. Financial fraud, identity theft, false investments, all tied to the defendant. And what's worse, she wasn't working alone. A gasp ripples through the courtroom. The husband stiffens. Michael Reeves, still seated in the witness stand, grips the arms of his chair, his face dark with confusion and anger. The prosecutor continues, flipping open the folder. Newly uncovered bank records show that the defendant was moving money into offshore accounts that were never in her name. They were under aliases, carefully crafted identities that she used to funnel money out of not just her husband's accounts, but also from multiple other individuals. Mr. Reeves, you were not the only one she was manipulating. Michael exhales sharply. What? The prosecutor nods. There were others. Men who also believed they were in a relationship with her. Men who gave her money, believing she was in desperate need, trapped in a loveless marriage, unable to escape. She fed them the same stories, the same tears, the same lies. And every time she gained something, money, security, power. Michael turns toward the defendant, his jaw clenched. How many? His voice is low, almost dangerous. She doesn't answer. The prosecutor picks up a separate document. At least 6 confirmed individuals. Possibly more. Some gave her money. Others helped her secure assets. And at least one unknowingly transferred ownership of property to her. She built an empire of deception. And she did it by making every single one of them believe they were the only one who mattered. The jury members shift uncomfortably in their seats. This case is no longer just about infidelity. It's about calculated, cold-blooded manipulation. The judge leans forward. Do you have proof of these allegations? The prosecutor nods. We do. And we also have a witness willing to testify. The courtroom doors open, and all eyes turn toward the figure stepping inside. A man, middle-aged, well-dressed, but visibly tense. He walks with purpose, his gaze locked onto the woman sitting at the defense table. And then, the unexpected happens. She gasps, not just a small, quiet sound, but a sharp, involuntary intake of breath. Her hands tremble. Her face, already pale, drains of what little color remains. She recognizes him. But more importantly, she wasn't expecting him. The prosecutor gestures toward the man. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jonathan Wells. And here's a very interesting story to tell. The room is buzzing with murmurs, but the woman at the defense table can't move. Her carefully constructed facade is finally cracking, and for the first time, true fear flickers in her eyes. Jonathan Wells takes a stand, and as he settles into his seat, he keeps his gaze locked on her. He doesn't blink. He doesn't waver. He is here for one reason, and one reason only, to expose everything. Jonathan Wells sits in the witness stand, his expression unreadable, but his presence alone sends shock waves through the courtroom. The defendant stares at him, her face frozen in disbelief. For the first time since the trial began, she looks truly afraid. She wasn't expecting him. She wasn't prepared for this. The prosecutor steps forward, flipping to the files in his hand, but his eyes never leave Jonathan. Mr. Wells, please state your relationship with the defendant. Jonathan exhales slowly, his fingers gripping the edge of the witness stand. We were in a relationship, he says, his voice steady but cold. A murmur spreads through the courtroom. Michael Reeves shifts in his seat, jaw tightening. The husband, still seated at the plaintiff's table, barely moves, but his eyes darken, taking in every word. The prosecutor nods. And during this relationship, did the defendant ever ask you for financial assistance? Jonathan lets out a bitter laugh. Financial assistance? No, she didn't ask for help. She took. The words hang heavy in the air. The prosecutor lifts a folder. Mr. Wells, can you clarify what you mean by took? Jonathan leans forward, his gaze locking onto the defendant. She stole from me. Over the course of 2 years, she manipulated me into transferring assets, wiring money, even signing documents I barely read, because I trusted her. I thought she loved me. He scoffs. But it was all a game to her, wasn't it? The defendant finally moves. She shakes her head slightly, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words come out. The prosecutor continues. Mr. Wells, can you estimate how much money was taken from you? Jonathan clenches his jaw. Over $120,000. The courtroom erupts. Gasps, whispers. Disbelief ripples through the spectators. Even the judge leans forward slightly, eyebrows raised. The husband grips the edge of the table. She stole from you? His voice is quiet, but there's a dangerous edge to it. Jonathan nods without hesitation. She told me she was leaving her husband, that she needed to secure herself financially before she could make the move. She said she couldn't trust joint accounts, that she needed to be careful. I believed her. I wired money. I gave her access to my accounts. I even let her use my identity to make investments. He exhales sharply. And I wasn't the only one. Michael Reeves, still seated in the witness stand, lets out a sharp breath. You too. Jonathan glances at him. Yeah. The prosecutor nods. And just to be clear, at no point did the defendant ever follow through on her promises to leave her husband? Jonathan shakes his head. No, there was always an excuse. The timing isn't right. I have to protect my children. My husband is watching my finances too closely. I waited. I gave her everything. And in the end, she vanished. The courtroom falls into a heavy silence. The pieces are falling into place. The prosecutor turns back to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not just looking at a case of infidelity. We are looking at a calculated web of manipulation. The defendant didn't just cheat on her husband. She created an empire of deception, using multiple men, promising love, extracting money, and disappearing the moment things became complicated. The defendant finally finds her voice. That's not true, she says, her voice shaky but defiant. The prosecutor turns to her. Not true? Which part? The affairs? The money? The stolen identities? The fraud? Or is it that you simply never thought you'd get caught? She doesn't answer. Jonathan leans forward slightly, his voice lower now. You weren't just playing with our hearts. You were playing with our lives. And now it's over. The husband lets out a slow, measured breath. He looks at his wife one last time. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with something even more devastating. Indifference. She is no longer the woman he once knew. The prosecutor steps back, his job done. The courtroom waits for the next move. The trial isn't over yet. But for the woman at the center of it all, the walls are finally closing in.